Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Booster Gaming here, and today we'll take a look at some of the best commanders that you can use in Rise of Kingdoms, as well as the best commander pairings that you can use in Rise of Kingdoms before you enter your first Kingdom versus Kingdom stage. So this is for people who are starting off the game from fresh. You're 2025, you actually just started the game, or you're like a month into the game. So this is a guide for those of you who are just starting off the game. And before we jump into the video, if you haven't done so already, please feel free to drop a like and subscribe, as that will help me out a ton. But let's just jump right in, and let's first take a look at the legendary commander options that are available for you from the very beginning. And I'm not going to go ahead and review all the commanders that are available for you as you start off the game. I'm going to look at a couple of them that are very widely used, that are very popular among all commanders or governors. With that said, let's first take a look at Minamoto, our boy Minamoto no Yoshitsune. Minamoto is probably one of the first commanders that a lot of governors have access to, as well as can expertise beyond any other commanders in the game. He's probably the most accessible, I would say, most accessible legendary commanders in the game, with the exception of perhaps Ethelfled. But let's take a look at what Minamoto is. So Minamoto is a single target nuker that can do up to 2600 damage factor with his first skill. 1400 plus 1200, because this is 600 damage for 2 seconds with 75% chance. So that means he has 2300 damage factor in average for a commander that is available from day 1. And you can get him from VIP 1 to VIP 9 special chests. And he is really powerful and really popular because of that single target damage nuking that he does. He also has a couple skills that will buff him, that will make him stronger as well as faster, and also this one skill that will amplify the damage taken for the target that he's targeting. So Minamoto is a very strong commander. You can also use him for barbarians as well with his third skill. Overall, very strong commander. One of the main reasons why a lot of cavalry mains actually start off the game with cavalry, because of the fact that you can expertise Minamoto right away, and he is almost overpowered in pre-KvK to KvK 1 stage. So very powerful commander, icon of cavalry in the very early stage of the game. Now, next commander that we can look at is Charles Martel. Now, Charles Martel, you can see that I don't have him expertise anymore because I actually commander swapped him out, but he is probably the icon of infantry. If Minamoto was icon of cavalry in pre-KvK stage, icon of infantry in the very beginning of the game is Charles Martel. So Charles Martel is a commander that is available for you through something that is called a gold key. If you go to one of your taverns, you can acquire him through gold keys. But the reason why he's more popular than other commanders in the game that are also acquirable through the gold key is that he's also one of the few commanders that you can acquire earlier part of the game with minus governor event. So as long as you rank, I think, top 16 of the Midas Governor ranking, you can unlock Charles Martel a lot earlier than a lot of other gold key commanders, a lot of other commanders just in general. So that's why he's very widely used. But not only that, he has a very powerful set that will make him pretty strong in the early games. So his active skill is Shield of Francia. He basically does shields himself for 1200 damage factor, which is not a lot. Again, we were just looking at Minamoto, who dealt 2600 damage factor. But then again, his second effect gives him 30% damage bonus for next 4 seconds. So that helps him be a great amplifier for whatever commander that you can put right after Charles Martel. And on top of that, he does get a lot more stats from his second skill as well as his expertise skill than any other commander that are available in the game from at this stage. So that makes him pretty strong tank basically, because it gives him 20% defense, 20% health, 20% march speed, and on top of that, his four skill allow him to be not swarmed by a lot of marches that are on the field. So it's for those of you who are really starting off, so this counterattack, Martel's counterattack, makes him do a lot more counterattack damage to whoever is attacking this commander, this march. So what that means is that if there's a lot of Minamotos that are attacking your Charge Martel, for example, they each take a white damage, like a white number called counterattack damage, and then when they do, when you actually use Charge Martel, you will do 30% additional damage, additional counterattack damage to that. So this makes him very tanky, very difficult and challenging for you to actually swarm him. But then again, a great skill here. His third skill is not really that relevant. It is only for city garrison if you're actually guarding your city. But then again, at this early stage of the game, he's probably one of the only commanders that actually can be used for your city garrison. And in the early game stage, you actually do get your cities attacked quite often. So that's what makes this skill useful for Charles Martel. But overall, very strong, very strong amplifier as well as a tank for infantry. And again, infantry's icon of infantry for this stage of the game. Okay, now let's take a look at icon of cavalry, icon of infantry. Let's take a look at icon of archer at this stage. So Tutmos III is the probably one of the most popular and probably the strongest archer legendary commander that is available for you at the early stage of the game. He does three target AoE damage, as well as healing reduction with his first skill. He does gain attack as well as movement speed and outside alliance territory damage buff. So this damage buff is huge, and at this stage I don't think any other commander has outside of alliance territory damage buff like he does. So he does a ton more damage if you're not in your alliance territory. So this makes this buff and extra attack, extra march speed makes him really strong at this stage. And he does also have archer defense if you're on the map, as well as skill damage increase debuff that you can inflict on target that you're actually hitting. So powerful buffs and debuffs that he can apply, although his active skill damage factor is only 1,000. He can hit multiple targets with this, so this makes him pretty strong early game commander. And this fourth skill right here makes him take less counterattack damage and also deal more damage, more skill damage to the target that you're actually hitting. Making and all this set combined together with his expertise that make him do more, take less damage from infantry, and do more normal damage. So all in all, his skill set combined together makes him pretty strong. The only downside of Tutmos III is the fact that he doesn't have any other way to be acquired except for gold keys. So for younger players especially, having a commander acquirable only through gold keys is pretty challenging, because you only have so many. You can only acquire so many gold keys at this stage. So being able to actually utilize his full kit, which all needs to be leveled up for them to unlock the potential damage of his skill set. I would say he's a powerful commander. He is indeed an icon of archer in my opinion for early game players. But then again, unfortunately, he is pretty tough to actually have max skilled out and then unlock his fullest potential of commander when compared to Minamoto, who is just acquirable through purchases, which is a lot easier. Uh, let's say Charles Martel, which you can get more ways to get his sculptures from just outside of Gold Key. So he's a little bit less accessible than other two commanders, but then again, his skill set is really good. Again, all those powerful buffs and debuffs makes him pretty strong in the early stage of the game. So those are the three main commanders that you can legendary commanders that you can use in early stages of the game. I'll go ahead and take a look at some of the other commanders that are more widely used, but then again, I'll go over them much quicker because they're not as relevant as those three that I talked about for each troop type. So KvK is the next commander that we can look at. He is probably one of the most commonly used pairing for Minamoto at the early stage of the game. He does do a pretty good debuff as well as decent single target damage. He does have march speed as well as attack, which also synergizes pretty well with Minamoto's own march speed and attack bonus, and just make them hit harder, make them move faster, and make them really versatile with that extra movement speed that you can actually get. And on top of that, cavalry also has faster base movement speed than other troop types in the game. So having that extra march speed on top of having already fast movement speed makes them pretty good option for them to be used in the early game. But then again, his other skill sets not really that exciting. I think the barbarian damage is okay, but then again, his force skill is actually pretty good. But then again, not as good as, let's say, some of the skills that Tutmos have. But when you're launching a basic attack, he has 10% chance to heal and gain extra rage, which is pretty good. Again, he's pretty common commander to be used in pairing with Minamoto when you first start off the game. He's also a gold key commander, but then again, there are some events that will allow you to get more sculptures of KvK in the earlier stage of the game, which kind of explains why I have him very low skills, because I swapped an expertise KvK with some of the Season of Conquest commanders, which you'll be able to basically swap out a skill level of one commander with another as you enter later stages of the game. But then again, I had an expertise KvK before. He was very good commander that I used mostly for barbs as well as some of the like march speed related events. Pretty strong commander. Let's just go ahead and move on. So Mehmet. So Mehmet is a commander that is pretty well used because of his for one, because his AoE damage is pretty high. So his first skill does 1150 area of effect damage up to 5 different targets on the map. So he is stronger than Tutmos in terms of area of effect damage that he can do. He does do those damage in a fan, which is not a half circle or a full circle. But then again, it is powerful enough. It is stronger than, again, what Tutmos had. But then again, on top of that, his buffs are actually what makes him really strong. His second skill makes him do more damage with extra attack, as well as 20% skill damage bonus. So 20% skill damage bonus makes him do so much more damage. And as well, on top of that, that also amplifies whoever he's with, whoever commander pair that he's with, to deal more damage as well. So he's an amplifier as well as an AoE DPS himself. So that's what makes him pretty strong. His third skill is just for attacking a city, but then again, it does more damage when you're attacking a city. And then the fourth skill actually allows him to get more unit capacity. So this is very useful when you're actually on the field. You get to actually bring out 10% more troops than, let's say, other troops that doesn't have this skill at all. So because this troop capacity will impact the amount of damage that you can deal with your auto attack as well as skills, this makes him pretty viable, pretty versatile, pretty great amplifier for any commander that he can actually work with. So unit capacity bonus is pretty strong buff that not a lot of commanders actually have. And once you actually have him expertise, meaning that if you have 5555 Met, you can actually upgrade your first skill to deal 1350 damage instead of 1150 damage. So that's an extra 200 damage factor that you could do in AoE. And I do not believe that AoE damage factor at this stage of the game, you can't find a single commander that can do more than 1350 at this time. Although it does get reduced for every target that you actually hit beyond your first. So pretty strong commander, very widely known, widely used, again because of his skill damage amplification as well as unit capacity amplification. So strong skill damage amplifier is basically what Met is. And let's move on to Ethelflaed. Ethelflaed is probably one of the cheapest commander that you can actually acquire. In fact, she's 100% free for you to get. The only way that you can actually get Ethelflaed is actually to clear out the expedition, which is basically the scenarios of Rise of Kingdoms. And when you actually clear each stage, you actually get more of those coins, so Medal of the Conqueror coins. And then you can actually purchase Ethelflaed sculptures every single day that you're actually on. And also, I believe you every day you can actually claim chests that will have also like a chance to get a lot of Ethelflaed sculptures. Give or less, I think if you're a month to two in, you'll be able to expertise Ethelflaed. So Ethelflaed is a pretty easy commander for everyone to get. And she does a 5 target AoE, 5 target area of effect damage with 800 damage factor. Now, you might think that 800 damage factor doesn't sound a lot. But then again, 800 damage factor that Ethelflaed does not reduce by the number of targets that is hit. Unlike, let's say, the one that we were just looking at, Met's damage does get reduced for each target that you hit beyond your first. So this AoE skill is actually pretty strong. Not amazing, but then again, her defense reduction, attack reduction, and health reduction that she applies to any target hit really debuffs the targets that you're hitting a lot. That is 90% total stats reduction that she can apply to a half circle AoE, which is a very, very strong skill. And this first AoE skill is basically the bread and butter of Ethelflaed. Her second skill basically makes you take less counterattack damage and then reduces the march speed of either cavalry or other troop types. If you're attacking on cavalry, it will reduce up to 50% of the march speed of cavalry march that you're actually hitting. And then other troop types, if you're hitting with 10% chance, you can also reduce up to 30% march speed. So she's a slower and a debuffer that does AoE damage is basically what she does so far. And you can also gain extra EXP as well as Barbarians, which is just a very good utility skill. And her fourth skill gives you rally capacity bonus, which is not a lot. I don't think it's just really that good. I don't think there's that many ways. So once you're actually max teched up, you don't really need rally army unit capacity bonus. So this is kind of irrelevant skill. But then again, if this commander troop has at least 3 unit types, it gains 20%. This is also not such a great skill option. Just because there's very few times that you actually do have 3 different unit types unless you don't have any troops available for you. So this is a pretty weak skill. Again, her main use is for her active skill of AoE that doesn't reduce, as well as the debuff that this applies, and also the movement speed. So she's widely used for the AoE as well as debuffs. And her 4th skill, this commander troop deals 20% more damage if the target is slow. So this kind of synergizes well with the slow that she has. Now let's take a look. Let's go ahead and move on to some of the less commonly used legendary commanders in the game, just because of the fact that they're less available to you. The only way those that you can get those commanders are through gold keys. But then again, Tutmos is just a level ahead in terms of their usage, his overall skill set. So Tutmos is more recently released gold key commanders, so I didn't talk about them I wouldn't put them in this category. But then again, there are some gold key commanders that are relatively more oftenly used in Rise of Kingdoms as you start off the game. And one of them is El Cid. He's an archer commander. With his active skill, he does 1000 damage, which is not great for a single target damage. But then again, with his 2nd skill, whenever you're launching a basic attack, it has 10% chance to deal additional 1000 damage factor. So he is a commander that has a chance to do 2000 damage factor within the 10 auto attacks that you actually do. So those two combined kind of makes him an okay single target damage factor commander for archers. Again, they're not as strong as, let's say, Minamoto. Minamoto does 1400 damage factor by itself, and then has 75% chance to deal extra 1200 damage factor. So 2600 damage factor, almost guaranteed. In average, deals 2300 damage factor. But then again, El Cid slightly weaker than that, and also takes up 2 different skill slots. So, wow, I I don't know what happened over there. Let's just go ahead and go back to El Cid. Okay. So El Cid, not the greatest commander that you can use, but then again, his other skills actually makes him pretty usable commander in the game. So his 3rd skill gives archers more tanky with debuff, 20% defense bonus and 15% march speed. So archers need a lot of march speed in the game, because archers have innately the slowest movement speed when compared to any other commander troops except for siege in the game. And then giving that 15% march speed as well as 20% defense bonus makes him pretty good commander that you can use in the early stage of the game. His 4th skill, so this is the only buff that can be applied when you're actually 50% or lower in total unit capacity. So if the commander's troops has less than 50% units remaining, it deals 5% more damage and gains 5% march speed. So a 25% march speed. So 25% more damage buff if you're actually low, as well as 25% march speed if you're actually low. So this kind of helps you run away from your enemies as you face them in the field, and you're about to die a lot faster. Is basically what this does. And it's also pretty useful in a 1v1 dueling scenarios, I guess, because if you're lower than 50%, you do a lot more damage. 25% damage bonus is no joke. But then again, I think in average, if you were to just count this, if you're going 1v1 against another March, and let's say you were both dropping down from 100 to 0, I think the only expected buff damage buff you can actually expect from this, because more health, more troops that you actually have in that march, the more damage that you deal. Is I think at the end of the day only up to 6.5%. I did the calculation in the back end, so not a great skill in the end. Again, very conditional. And his passive skill, expertise skill, basically gives you another 5% attack, 5% defense, and then 2% additional damage to infantry. Not amazing, not bad, decent skill for you to have. And the last commander that we'll take a look at for people who are starting off the game is actually Frederick. So Frederick is a leadership commander, so he can be used with almost any other troop type in this game that does a ton of damage with his first skill. So let's read through his first skill. For the next 3 seconds, whenever this commander's troop launches a basic attack, it has 80% chance to deal 800 damage. So that means that he has 80% chance to deal 2400 damage factor. And once expertise, that becomes 100%. So for next 3 seconds, he will do 2400 damage factor to a single target damage, as long as you can continuously attack that person. So this makes him another single target damage nuker. Again, the 2400 damage factor is not the 2600 damage factor that Minamoto can do with 75%. But then again, in expected, in average, as long as you can continuously hit that single target, Freddy has the most single target damage factor that you can do technically before you start off first KvK. So 2400 damage factor with his first skill, crazy. And that just by itself makes him very, very, very useful. Not a lot of players actually use Frederick because of that 80% chance unless expertise. But in technical power level terms, Frederick is really strong commander that is pretty underrated in my opinion. But then again, he's also a gold key commander, so he's not really that accessible for a lot of people. So that's another reason why a lot of people don't really use him. But let's go and take a look at his second skill. So whenever this commander's troop launches a basic attack, it has 10% chance to basically heal for 1000 damage factor. Not bad. Healing is pretty good for you if you're, let's say, rallying something and your unit capacity is a lot larger than let's say your regular field. So second skill is pretty good for rallying in my opinion. His third skill, this commander's troop deals 2% more damage, 10% more damage when attacking a city. Not too bad, not so great. If you're rallying a city, this is useful. His fourth skill and the final skill, because we already took a look at his expertise skill, this commander's troop gains 15% unit capacity. 15%, that is even higher than whatever Mehmet had. Mehmet had 10% unit capacity. This one gives 15% unit capacity. And it synergizes really well with his first skill, or expertise skill, which will deal 2400 damage factor. But then again, if you actually have more trips, you'll do even more damage. So this synergizes really, really well with his high single target damage nuking ability. So single target nuker with a lot of amplification is what I would actually put Frederick as. Alright, so that's almost all the commanders that I wanted to take a look at today, and almost all the commanders that are most popularly used during the pre-KvK stage. You can take a look at some other commanders like Hannibal, but you don't use him. Don't even buy his bundle. He's another commander that is purchasable like Minamoto through a VIP bundle. Like, don't buy him. Like, he's a waste. He's a huge waste of money in my opinion. So just don't invest in Hannibal. And the other ones are mostly just let's say like Sun Duck or Cleopatra or what is his name, Ishida. They're all gathering commanders, so they're not really that useful. And then like you can technically argue that Julius Caesar is okay, but uh, he's just a buffer, and I think that amplifiers like Met are just better than Julius. So anyway, so those are all the commanders that I wanted to take a look at in terms of legendary. And let's go ahead and move on to some of the epic commanders that can be used in the early stage of the game. I'm only going to take a look at a couple of them that are like top of the tier, the SS tiers of epics, because for one, epics innately will have lesser power level than legendary commanders. So, and one of the purpose of actually this video is for me to give you the best commander pairings. But then again, some of the epics are actually much stronger than even early game legendary commanders that you have access to, and we'll only look at those commanders that have comparable powers only. And let's start with none other than Sun Tzu. So Sun Tzu's first skill, which is also empowered by his expertise skill. So we'll take a look at from the expertise skill. We'll deal direct damage to five different targets in a fan. So kind of like Ethelflaed, but his area effect damage is actually smaller than Ethelflaed. But then again, on top of that, after 1 second, troops hit by the skills take additional 200 damage factor. So his AoE does 1000 damage factor, and that is already better than legendary commander Ethelflaed. And on top of that, the reason why this skill is so crazy is because for every troop hit by the skill, this commander's troop gains 50 rage. So if you hit 5 different targets with this skill, you'll be able to generate 250 rage. Although there is like a rage limit for you that you can actually get for each turn. This commander, despite being an epic commander, his first skill alone is already almost better than Ethelflaed. And let me just make that clear. Sun Tzu's first skill alone makes Sun Tzu almost as strong, if not stronger, commander than a legendary commander Ethelflaed. So that's why everyone tells you to build Sun Tzu. If you have watched all the other guys for Rise of Kingdoms for beginners, everyone will say you have to build Sun Tzu. And this is why, because Sun Tzu does so much damage with his first skill and will reuse that skill way faster than other people. So if you look at it, this is a skill that only requires you to, the rage requirement is only 1000. So this last line right here, that means that this will make your next skill come 25% faster, basically. And this, when you actually calculate the damage factor, like equivalent of this, is really insane. So Sun Tzu's really strong AoE damage, period. And on top of that, his other skills are also very crazy too. His second skill basically gives you more city garrison damage reduction, so it's not too bad. But then again, this is really useful if combined with his third skill, which will make you take 10% less damage. So if you're city garrisoning, you take 17% less damage just by using Sun Tzu. And on top of that, it gives you 10% infantry health, which is the best stat that you can actually get for any troop type in the game. And all on top of that, he also buffs himself for another 20% more skill damage. So this is not 1000 damage factor is 1200 damage factor minimum. And on top of that, he will do 25% faster skill cycle, and this is what makes Sun Tzu so strong, and this is why he's a legendary commander level epic commander. So Sun Tzu is a very strong commander. Use him if you can. Like, use him if you can. That's my only recommendation that I can have. Use him as Charles Martel. Use him at like other epic commanders. Just use him when you first start off the game. And let's take a look at the second commander that we can actually take a look at, Baibars. Baibars is a pretty strong commander just because of his first skill. This commander with rage requirement of 1000, his Sandstorm will deal direct damage up to 5 enemy troops in a fan. So this might not sound so strong, but then again, if you read carefully, this does not have damage reduction factor, just like Sun Tzu. And commanders like for example, Mepman has a damage. Like, if you hit more than one target, you have damage. Like, your AOE damage is gonna go down. Tutmos the same way. If you're hitting more than one target, the damage will go down per target you're actually hitting. But then again, this is 5 target AOE with 1000 damage factor with none of that. So there's not that many legendary commanders in the game that is available at this stage that can do as much AOE damage, like, because this has 5 target hitting potential. So this skill alone has a potential to do 5000 damage factor in a fan in front of you. Again, we were just talking about how crazy Minamoto was, but then again, Sun Tzu and Baibars, both of them has huge potential to do a lot of AOE damage, so that's why he's really good, and that's why Baibars is pretty good. His second skill gives you cavalry attack, which will basically amplify his damage. Not amplify, but, like, make him hit harder. And then no escape is if you're actually attacking a city, you'll reduce the city's garrison loses attack and defense. So more of a swarming ability, not so important for most cases. But then again, his fourth skill, when you exit the combat, it gains 50% march speed. So rest of his is not that too amazing, but then again, his first skill makes him such a great open-field commander that in earlier stages of the game, if you don't have a pretty good Cao, or if you don't have a pretty good AoE damage dealer behind your Minamoto, Baibars is probably your best bet for your field, in my opinion. Alright, so that's Baibars. Let's also take a look at Bjorn. So Bjorn is an interesting epic commander. Not a lot of people actually know how strong he is, but then again, his first skill does 1000 rage requirement, does 700 damage factor, and then for the next 3 seconds, up to 3 of the enemy troops in a fan takes 15% more skill damage. So this is actually a pretty strong skill. It does debuff, but then again, do damage factor of 700. But not only that, his actually other ability, I think this ability right here. So he has 10%, whenever he's launching a basic attack, it has 10% chance to deal extra direct damage to the target. So despite being an epic commander, this commander has a chance to deal up to, like, I don't know, 1500 damage factor within like a 10-second 1 skill cycle window. So pretty strong skill set. And 15% while attacking a city is not really that interesting. But then again, 10% attack, 10% defense, so 20% total stats for an epic commander is pretty strong. So that basically is a pretty strong buff that he has, and his expertise is basically what makes the first skill good. So overall, relatively good epic commanders. A lot of people actually use him if you don't have, let's say, Charles Martel at least to 5111, at least have his first skill max. So in the meantime, while you're actually acquiring Charles Martel to usable stage, you can use Bjorn paired with Sun Tzu to do maximum damage on the field if you're an infantry main, or if you're even if you're not infantry main, that's a commander that you should be using for your infantry troops that you have on the field. I think the only other commander that is even worth noting is actually Kusunogi. And this commander is basically a Sun Tzu and Baibar's equivalent for archers. He does 300 damage factor and then additional 500 damage factor, so 250 times 2. So he does overall 800 damage factor. But then again, for the target that is hitting, he also has 10% chance to deal 450, so not bad. He also cleanses a lot of debuffs, so counters Flood to a degree, in my opinion. Actually, I don't know if that's the normal debuff. Okay, so he does kind of keep your commander going, and it does have a pretty good attack and defense buff as well with his expertise. So he's a usable commander, not so strong to be compared to Sun Tzu or Baibar's. Or even, but actually he's more of a Bjorn level commander. So if you were to say Sun Tzu and Baibar's are like the S tier commanders among all epics that you can actually use, Bjorn and Kusunogi are basically A tier commanders that can be used while you're waiting for other legendary commanders to be usable stage. So just keep those in mind. All right, that was pretty long overview of all the epic and legendary commanders that are most commonly used at the early stage of the game. Now let's go ahead and move on to the best commander pairings that you can use in Rise of Kingdom during pre-KvK stage. Now here I have basically prepared all the different comps that I actually seen used more than once in during my pre-KvK eras, or like that I can think of off the top of my head. This column right here basically lists out whatever they have. So this one is Charles Martel and Sun Tzu, and so on and so on. And then they basically give you a name for each of them. CM means Charles Martel, Sun Tzu, and so forth. And accessibility. So accessibility basically rates how accessible those commanders are. Obviously, epics are the most accessible commanders that you can have access to in the game. And then I think Minamoto and Ethelflaed are pretty easy to get for legendary commanders. And then Charles Martel is pretty easy. Charles Martel is pretty easy to get because of the Mighty's Governor sculptures that you can get. And Cao is a little bit more accessible because he's gold key and acquirable through various events. And the gold key commanders are actually the least accessible commanders in this game. So based on whatever this pairing has, so for example, Frederick and Mehmet, they're both gold key commanders that doesn't have any alternative ways for you to actually get them. They're going to be D tier in terms of accessibility. This also lists out all the buffs that they can actually have in terms of stats, as well as other buffs. So other buffs are the buffs that are relatively relevant, but then again, not relevant enough to actually do like impact the skill sets, like skill damage factor and whatnot. But then again, like movement speed, counterattack damage, damage taking reduction. So those are all the things that I think you should take into consideration when you're thinking about choosing what pair to actually use. So those others are listed right here. And relative buffs. So this is relative buff to skill factor. So let's say, and this is based on 10-second skill / rage cycle. So meaning that we're assuming that each commander will take 10 seconds for them to first inflict their first skills, basically. And then these relative buffs are anything that actually could impact those damage factor for skill cycle. For example, skill damage 20%. This will add 20% skill damage factor to whatever damage that you're actually doing. So pretty straightforward. And then 50 rage target for hit. So that calculation is pretty interesting. So it's going to actually multiply the damage factor, the whole damage factor, because this would give rage to not only Charles Martel but also Sun Tzu. So not only Sun Tzu but also Charles Martel. And this is a pretty important effect from Sun Tzu's first skill, and will basically make those skill sites go faster. And then I amplified that by using this. But then again, 30% damage bonus to secondary. So Charles Martel's first skill allows your secondary commander to deal 30% more. So it basically took in all those relative buffs into effect as much as possible. For example, if you go to and then this is for one minimum target. So if you're actually hitting one target, this is how much damage factor you should be getting. Rally factor, the reason why this is a little bit different than the first one is because, for one, some of them, like for example this one right here, so like Minamoto and Frederick, so if you're rallying someone, the unit capacity of 15% buff actually doesn't apply, because if you max out your rally anyways, that rally capacity will not change for your commander. So that's what this rally factor does. So it basically takes out anything that you can't apply if you were to be in a rally lead than a single like 1v1 field or whatever it is. So that's how those two are different. And then realistic is basically if you're doing a fan shape AoE, you're most likely gonna hit 2 target, just an estimate, just so that we can make this calculation a lot easier for everyone. If it's a half circle, I think the only one that has half circle damage is Ethelflaed. It's going to be 3 times. So we're expecting Ethelflaed to hit 3 targets with her 800 damage factor active seal. And then if you have a circular AoE, which we don't have it at pre-KvK stage, but then again, let's say if you have Isongye for next KvK1 stage, circular AoE would deal, the expected number that you can hit in average is 4, is basically how I'm calculating this. And the max means the max amount of target that you can actually hit, and what's the damage, maximum damage that you can actually do with everything that you actually, like with all the assumption in favor of your march. For example, Sun Tzu will hit 5 targets. That will basically make this maximum damage go up a lot more, and so forth. And then we'll go ahead and take a look at each pairing, and then at the end of the day, I'll give final evaluation with those marks right here. And so honey, so this honeybee right here, I'm going to actually give honeybee to any march that I basically recommend that you should be using. Honey in Korean terms, because I'm Korean, like honey just means that it's very, very sweet spot that you want to be. So let's say, for example, if I think the Sun Tzu and Charles Martel is such a great comp and cost effective, I'll give it a honey. So that's how that works. So that's the column for that, honey. And then field, I'll give it, like, what's the best field march? I'll give it a gold crown or a black crown. Gold crown. Gold crown means that it is best of the class and is overall relative. You've seen it a lot in your pre-KvK stage, because they're not like 2 gold key commanders. So if the accessibility is higher than B, I'll give them a gold crown. But then again, if the accessibility is less than B minus, I'll give it a black crown, because you're most likely not gonna see a Frederick Mepman rally, because I play this game for 1,000 days. I don't have Mepman expertise, so during pre-KvK stage, you're not gonna see a Frederick Mepman, period, most of the time. But if it's the technical best, I'll give it a black crown. All right, well, with that said, let's just go ahead and get started. So first one that we have here, Sun Tzu, Charles Martel, Sun Tzu. Pretty good buffs, and then it's like minimum damage factor is pretty low, but then again, its maximum damage factor is 12,000. The reason why that's the case is because of the fact that the rage hit per target amplifies the damage so much. On top of that, he has 20% damage factor. Additional, on top of that, he also has 30% damage bonus from Charles Martel's first skill. Although shield is not impacted by all those other multiplication, that shield is also impacted by the rage generation. So all in all, this March, Charles Martel Sun Tzu has the maximum damage factor potential amongst all the marches that are available during pre-KvK stage. But then again, if you don't hit that many targets, this expected damage outcome is not so great. That's basically what you can tell. Pure Sun Tzu, accessibility wise, is a lot better than Sun Tzu and Charles Martel. It's S plus because it's just two epic commanders. Its max damage potential is still there, but realistic damage is still less. Again, I think Charles Martel Sun Tzu is just a better comp. So if you can, use Charles Martel Sun Tzu. If not, use Bjorn and Sun Tzu. And by the way, I did calculate his third skill or fourth skill that has like I think like 10% chance to do extra whatever percent damage. But then again, it happens every 15 seconds if you think about the fact that it has 5-second cooldown. So that's how I actually factor those in. But anyways, Charles Martel Sun Tzu is still better comp than Bjorn Sun Tzu. But then again, it's a decent one given how accessible this march is. Charles Martel Medmed. Accessibility is B- because both of them are gold key commanders. But then again, Charles Martel is a lot easier for you to get than Medmed because of the fact that he's Midas Governor commander. So Charles Martel, Medmed, I would say accessibility is B-. Med is just really hard for you to get at this stage. So unless you're willing to put every single gold head that you actually have on Med, it's not really accessible commander. It has pretty good unit cap buff. It has pretty good skill damage buff. But then again, the damage output for 2 or more commander for realistic wise is better than Sun Tzu. But the maximum damage output, even if you're hitting 5 targets, is pretty low because of the fact that 1350 damage factor is going to get reduced all the way down to 0.55 if you're hitting 4 targets. So the reason why this is not 5 target hitting assumption is because if you go 5 target, is actually 5 times 0.4, which is only 200% of the original damage. Whereas 4 targets times 0.55 is 220%. So maximum damage wise, actually assuming that you're hitting 4 targets, better. So despite all the skill damage buff, unit capacity buff, Medmed Charles Martel is not as strong in my opinion as say Charles Martel and Sun Tzu. It does have a little bit more realistic hitting assumption, but then again, I don't think it's really big enough of a difference, given how accessible Sun Tzu is. So those are all the infantry main commanders or comps that I could think of that are most commonly used in Rise of Kingdoms during pre-KvK stage. Let's go ahead and move on to anything that you can pair Minamoto with. Minamoto KvK. The reason why this accessibility is not B- or B is because Minamoto is more available than Medmed. KvK is a little bit more available than any other gold key commanders in the game, I believe. So this comp is pretty well used comp. Minamoto CC, one of the most commonly used like cavalry rallies in the game, in my opinion. It has 50% attack buff, so it does do a lot more damage. It will hit pretty hard. does have 20% movement speed buff. And it has like relative buffs, like 10% chance to do the amplification buff from Minamoto, as well as like the rage generation at 10% chance for KvK, giving them a 4700 damage factor for minimum, rally, and maximum. Overall, pretty strong Marsh in my opinion. But then again, you know, KvK, getting expertise KvK is pretty difficult. So there are some drawbacks here. Minamoto and Frederick. So Minamoto and Frederick. Frederick again does 2400 damage factor to a single target if you're actually hitting a single target. So that's a pretty strong commander comp. But because Frederick is a little less available than KvK, I'll give it a B minus. Buff's okay. Unit capacity is pretty good. So if you're actually on the field without rallying something, it does up to 6,441 damage to a single target damage, which is one of the highest single target damage factor that you can actually deal in the game if you're actually not rallying something. If you're rallying something, the unit capacity of 15% doesn't really matter, so it does 5600 damage factor to a single target, and that is indeed the largest damage factor that you can deal when you're rallying something during this stage as well. But that doesn't really go up if you're hitting as you are going into more realistic and maximum damage, because they're both single target damage factor commanders. Okay, let's move on to Ethelflaed with Minamoto. They're really accessible, S tier, but then again, their damage factor is not really so great because Ethelflaed's damage is not really that good. And that's why Minamoto Baibars actually out DPSs them despite Baibars being the epic commander. So you can see that even for single target damage, Baibars does a lot more damage because Ethelflaed does 800 damage factor and Baibars does 1000 damage factor. And then as it hits more targets, it deals more damage. So if it's hitting 2 targets, Ethelflaed does do a little bit more. I think. I wonder why that was the case. Wonder why is that the case? Oh, it's because Ethelflaed is expecting to hit 3 targets because it's a half circle anyway. Yeah, so, but then again, if you go to maximum target damage factor, Baibars Minamoto is better. So, use Baibars Minamoto if you are going to use Ethelflaed. But if you actually have Mehmed available, which is a lot less accessible, again, getting Mehmed to even usable stage at this point is really bad. But then again, with assuming that you have an expertise Mehmed with unit capacity above 10% and 20% skill damage, it will do a lot. It will hit a lot harder than Minamoto Baibars on the field. But again, accessibility wise, that's not too good. All right, now let's move on to archers. So Tutmos Mehmed are both gold key commanders. So Tutmos Mehmed is going to be very inaccessible for most players on the game. You will have to pour down your gold heads into maximizing both of them, and then even then it's questionable. But its AoE damage is actually really good. So minimum damage is 4200, which is even better than Minamoto Baibars, Minamoto Ethelflaed. Pretty strong. Rally is whatever. We're not going to use rally for Tutmos Mehmed, so I'm just going to skip it. If it's realistic, so if you're, let's say, both hitting 2 targets, it does 6700 damage factor, which is one of the top tier realistic damage that you can see. And then if you're maximizing the damage factor is 8400, which is still pretty strong only second to anything that uses Sun Tzu. Elcid, Tutmos, same deal. Both gold key commanders, very unlikely that you're going to be able to use them. And it has a lot of buff. You can see that the relative buff section is like blowing up here. But then again, it does do decent damage to single target. But then again, that doesn't really get amplified too much beyond that. So if I have to suggest, I'll just use Tutmos Metman, like if you can. But anyways, so Elcid, Tutmos, not so great, not so bad. Let's just go ahead and move on. Tutmos Frederick. So if you were to use Frederick as secondary, or you can use Frederick as primary and then use Tutmos as secondary. So this gives them a lot heavier minimum damage guaranteed because of the fact that Frederick can do up to 2400 damage factor, and Tutmos actually has a lot of damage amplification as well. So minimum damage you can do is 5800, which is pretty strong, only second to Minamoto Frederick. And then rally is okay, and then the realistic AoE is also really good because of the fact that Tutmos can also do AoE. So not a bad comp. But then again, max damage is not as high as, let's say, Tutmos Metman. So if you're trying to do AoE damage, maximum AoE damage, most likely Tutmos Metman is still better. And let's move on to Tutmos Ethelflaed. So if you have Ethelflaed, you can use Tutmos, and Ethelflaed is really, really accessible, so the accessibility is B tier. But then again, the damage that you can we can get to do to one target is really low. But if you get to realistic damage factor, it's 5700 damage factor, which is not bad. It is higher than Minamoto Biowires. So if you have Tutmos, if you invested everything in Tutmos, you don't have enough gold keys for you to actually get Metman maxed out. Ethelflaed is a great alternative if you're maining archers, is basically what this tells you. And for last but not least, Frederick Metman. So this is a leadership commander, gold key commander. Very inaccessible. It's a D. I would even give it an F because they're both leadership. Most people are going to go in and focus on other things like Tutmos if they are going to choose gold key commanders, 2 gold key commanders. So very, 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 very inaccessible commanders. But then again, because their unit capacity buff and skill damage buff amplifies so much, a single target damage not rallied is the highest at this stage of the game. But then again, if you're rallying something, unit capacity doesn't really matter. So the single target damage comes second to Minamoto Frederick. But then again, it's AoE damage. The realistic AoE damage is the highest in the game. But its maximum damage is second to Sun Tzu. Any Sun Tzu comps, because Sun Tzu, again, more targeted hits. It hits up to 5 target, and it just amplifies crazily as it hits more target. So that's all the comps that I could think of off the top of my head. And while I was looking at all the commanders that are more widely available, and let's go ahead and evaluate each of them. I'm going to go ahead and zoom out a little bit. Let's start with the honey section. Easy honey, Charles Martel, Sun Tzu. Use it. Bjorn, Sun Tzu. I think this is very honey. Very accessible. Like two epic commanders use, and their power level is not really far off from 5111 Sun Tzu to 5111 Charles Martel Sun Tzu. So very strong. If you're actually working in Kenyan, this is actually a really, really good comp that you can actually use to just maximize your Kenyan ranking as well. So Bjorn, Sun Tzu, very honey. Very cost effective and very powerful. That's what honey means. So if it's cost effective, very powerful, that is honey. And for Minamoto comp, Minamoto Biowires is a honey. Very good all around in my opinion. I don't think Minamoto and KvK is that good. So that's it. Like Minamoto. So anything that uses Sun Tzu is great. It is very cost effective, very powerful. And then Minamoto and buy bars, because they're very accessible. Well, this might be S minus in terms of accessibility because you have to buy Minamoto. But they're all really, really good in terms of return on investment that you actually have on those commanders. Now, for the very best commanders on the field, for very best commander on the field, I would say we'll go to Charles Martel and Sun Tzu. The reason for that is because realistic wise, they're not doing so much damage. But if you actually average if you sum up realistic and max, they actually have the highest realistic and max sum. Again, Bjorn Sun Tzu, it's not even accepted somewhere close. And Frederick Mehmet, which has the highest realistic damage, if you sum it up to maximum targets, it's not really at the level of Charles Martel and Sun Tzu is. And to be really, really honest, if you're on the field, you're not gonna just hit 2 targets with Sun Tzu's Sun Tzu's ability. You're gonna hit like 2.53 targets. I just couldn't find a better way to do this. But you're gonna hit like 3 targets, 4 targets, even 5 targets pretty often. And I think the king of field at pre-KvK stage is really Charles Martel Sun Tzu. But if you were to have so much money to actually burn down on gold keys and gold heads earlier on, I would say Mehmet and Frederick does deserve a black crown, in my opinion. Minamoto by bars is pretty good, but look at the max damage output difference. You can't really give it to Minamoto by bars too. So field, the gold crown goes to Sun Tzu, Charles Martel. The best, I think, is Charles Martel, Sun Tzu at this stage. All right, so let's move on to rally. So rally, I think rally is basically most likely going to go to I can't give it to Minamoto. You have to give it to Black Crown. So Minamoto Frederick. So Minamoto Frederick does the most rally damage factor in the game, period. Does the most damage to single target damage. Can't really beat that damage. 5,600 damage factor for rally. You don't have that anywhere else. And Golden Crown. But most people are not going to have Minamoto Frederick, so if you were to give it a gold crown, I would say Minamoto KvK is still a gold crown because it does give 30% extra damage factor, for 30% extra attack, which is arguably enough to compensate for the rally factor that is missing. Also, it has 50 rage, although that's calculated into those things. I think Minamoto and KvK can still deserve a gold crown. Like it is probably the best rally that you have at this stage of the game. So Minamoto, Frederick, gold crown, well deserved. And for rally and for garrison, Charles Martel and Sun Tzu has a lot of garrisoning abilities. And in all honesty, so Sun Tzu that has 10% damage taken reduction. Charles Martel has shield, does a lot of counterattack damage. And no other comp in this stage of the game actually has garrison. So I'll just give Charles Martel the best garrison. Charles Martel Sun Tzu the best garrison in the game during pre-KvK and call it a day. There is no Black Crown for this one, like, period. So, all right, well, that's it for today. I hope everyone enjoyed this video. This is basically the pre-KvK, all the commanders that are most commonly used during the pre-KvK stage. And obviously, I didn't go over every single possible commander pairing in the game, but then again, I did take a look at most of them that are available. And if you're just starting off the game, just go ahead and take a look at this guide, and you can basically tell, okay, so those are the commanders that are most commonly used. What route should I go? Should I go Minamoto Baibars? I bought Minamoto, maxed out expertise. Then, if I want to use it on the field, maybe I should go ahead and use it for Minamoto Baibars and so forth. So, hopefully, this was helpful for those of you who are starting off the game. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. But as always, I will see you on the next video.